They say your life can change in a moment, but for me it happened over scrambled eggs and silence. I was 41 when I first noticed him. Tuesday morning, mid-October. The leaves hadn't quite fallen yet, but the wind had picked up just enough to make the doorbell above the cafe door jingle sharp and loud. I was wiping down the front counter of Ellie's Cafe, a place I'd worked at for nearly a decade in a small Kansas town. Most people only pass through when their GPS reroutes. That morning, a boy walked in. Small frame, maybe 9 or 10, but with the kind of serious face you don't expect to see on a child. Not scared, not nervous, just watchful. He slipped quietly into the last booth by the window, the one customers rarely choose because the sunlight hits it too hard after 800. He didn't order anything, just sat there with a book open and a worn-out backpack beside him. I approached coffee pot in hand, gave him my warmest service smile. "Morning, sweetheart. Can I get you something?" He looked up only briefly, then back at his book. "Just water, please." The way he said it, polite, firm, practiced, caught me off guard. Like it wasn't the first time he'd had to ask for something small, something safe. I brought him a glass with a paper straw and didn't press. Next morning, same time, same booth, same book. Again, he ordered only water. No parent, no ride, no breakfast. He sat in that booth like it was the only safe place he knew. After 4 days, I stopped pretending I wasn't noticing. I started checking the time around 7:10 as if expecting a friend to arrive. By the second week, I knew the routine, 7:15 sharp backpack placed carefully beside him, eyes scanning the room before settling into the book. He never said more than "thank you" always left at 7:55, walking alone in the direction of the elementary school a few blocks away. On the 15th day, I did something I hadn't planned. I set down a plate of blueberry pancakes in front of him. I smiled and said, "Kitchen got the order wrong. Figured someone should eat them instead of the trash." He stared at the plate fork, untouched, suspicion flickering behind his tired eyes. I didn't wait for him to refuse. I just walked away. 10 minutes later, I returned to find the plate clean syrup, smudged on the side fork, resting on the napkin, just so like he hadn't wanted to leave a mess. He never thanked me out loud. Not that day. Just nodded. Barely. But the way he looked at me just for a second longer than usual told me what I needed to know. He wasn't used to kindness that didn't come with questions. And I wasn't offering any. Each morning after that, a mistaken order found its way to his table. One day scrambled eggs, another oatmeal with brown sugar. The kitchen never asked and I never explained. I used my own tips to cover it when the register came up short. To the rest of the world, I was just a middle-aged waitress with tired feet and a coffee-stained apron. But in that small slice of morning in that booth by the window, I felt like I was offering something more than food. I was giving that boy a reason to breathe easier for just a little while. Sometimes kindness isn't loud. Sometimes it's just pancakes and silence. I didn't tell anyone about the boy, not at first. Some kindnesses lose their shape when held up to daylight. But Ellie, the line cook who ran the grill like a drill sergeant with a cigarette, eventually caught on. On the 3rd week, she cornered me in the back by the walk-in freezer. Her arms were crossed, spatula in hand, like a weapon. "You got yourself a little stray?" she asked. Not unkind, but with the weariness of someone who'd lived through too many sob stories. I kept wiping down the stainless steel tray in my hand. Just a kid who's hungry before school. Ellie narrowed her eyes. "You feeding him from your own pocket?" I nodded. "1 plate a day. It's not going to break me." She grunted, more of a sigh than anything. "They don't usually stick around, you know. Strays. One day they just vanish." I know. That was the first time in years I'd told anyone something real. Not just about the boy, but about myself. About the way hunger used to sit in my belly like a fist when I was 12, waiting for my mom to bring home leftovers from the diner she worked at 2 towns over. Still, I didn't ask the boy questions. Something about him told me not to. The way he always sat with his back to the wall, eyes flicking toward the door every time it opened, he wasn't just there for the food. He was watching the world like it might turn on him any second. So I made that little corner of the diner feel predictable, safe. Water glass topped off, napkin folded the same way. Food served warm. I'd grown to recognize that slight shift in his shoulders when he started to relax just a bit, never all the way. A few regulars noticed. They didn't say much, but the ones who did, well, they had opinions. Playing soup kitchen now, one older man in a cheap suit muttered as I passed his booth. "Kids these days," another said with a huff. "Expect handouts everywhere. No wonder no one wants to work anymore." I didn't argue. I'd learned the hard way that explaining kindness to someone determined not to feel it was like pouring water into a sieve. But Mark the manager couldn't be ignored. He was the type who always looked like he was sweating even in winter. Called me into his little office one morning, coffee in one hand, clipboard in the other. "What's going on with the kid?" he asked without preamble. I stood stiff, heart pounding a little harder than I expected. "He's not causing trouble." "No, but you're feeding him on the house." "I'm paying for it, out of my tips." Mark scoffed. "You make enough to do that." I didn't answer. I just looked at him the way my mother used to look at me when I asked whether we could keep the heat on longer in December. He leaned back in his squeaky chair, studied me a moment. "Fine. Just don't let it interfere with your shifts. And if the kid ever brings drama, it stops." It wasn't a victory, but it wasn't a firing either. I could live with that. So every morning I slipped $2 from my tip jar into the register, scribbled something quick on the ticket, and fed a child no one else seemed to see. I'd been meaning to fix my back molar for months. Winter was coming, and my boots had a split in the sole. But none of that felt urgent compared to the look in that boy's eyes when he saw the food. Some mornings he ate like it was his first meal in days. Other times slow and quiet, like drawing out the moment. He never looked up when he ate. He never asked for more. And somehow, I never needed him to. The first morning he didn't come, I told myself not to overthink it. Kids get sick. They stay home. They miss buses. It happens. But by the time 7:30 rolled around and his booth still sat empty, my stomach had a knot in it I couldn't untangle. I made his pancakes anyway. Left them on the table like a placeholder, as if his absence could be reversed just by setting down a warm plate. I told myself it was just a habit. But the truth is, I missed him more than made sense. Kathy, who worked the register and had a mouth sharper than her eyeliner, walked by and muttered, "You know that food's going in the trash, right?" I ignored her. I wrapped the untouched plate and brought it home that night like it meant something. I couldn't throw it away. The next day he still didn't show, nor the next. By day 5, that booth had become a hole in the morning. A quiet, aching gap I kept glancing at between pouring coffee and resetting silverware. Kathy raised her eyebrows and said, "Told you. These kinds of kids, they vanish. Never even say goodbye." I hated how right she sounded. 10 days passed. 10 mornings of setting down a plate, then quietly removing it when it stayed full. I stopped making new food after the first week, but I couldn't stop looking. Couldn't stop hoping. Then the worst part came. A customer, probably someone passing through, took a photo of the empty booth, of me setting down a plate that would never be eaten. I didn't notice at the time. The next day I did. Ellie came storming out of the back holding her phone, eyes wide. "You seen this?" she asked, shoving the screen toward me. There it was, a post from a local Facebook group. The photo of me and the empty booth captioned "Rosie's Cafe now serving ghosts and charity cases." And the comments, God, the comments. She probably throws it away and claims it's a tax write-off. Bet the kid was fake set up for sympathy tips. Feeding strays just makes them come back expecting more. She'll regret it when he robs the place. I stood there reading, heart-sinking with every word. I wasn't new to small-town gossip. I'd heard people say plenty behind my back. About being alone, about working too long in one place, about not moving on with life. But this stung deeper. I went home that night and sat in my small apartment above the pharmacy lights, dim fingers numb around a lukewarm mug of tea. I pulled out the wooden box I kept in the back of the closet. Inside were the only things I'd managed to hold on to through every move and every letdown. My father's old military journal, a photograph of him in his uniform smiling, despite the heat and exhaustion behind him. I opened the journal to the page I'd read 100 times. Shared my rations today with a local kid. Johnson says I'm a fool that the boy might sell us out. But when I looked at him, just a scrawny thing with sand in his hair and fear in his eyes, I thought about Mom saving me the last bite of bread when we had nothing. You don't grow poor by sharing, but you do grow hollow by keeping everything to yourself. His handwriting was shaky, ink faded, but the words still reached across time and war and blood to settle in my chest. I sat there for a long time, tears I hadn't realized were forming tracing down my cheek. I didn't need to know the boy's name. I didn't need to know his story. All I needed to remember was what hunger looked like, and how it felt to be seen. Because some people don't want charity, they want dignity, and pancakes served without a question. By the 12th morning, I stopped pretending I wasn't grieving. It felt ridiculous mourning someone I barely knew, a boy whose name I didn't even ask, but his absence clung to me like smoke. I kept reaching for him in routine. I'd pour an extra cup of water, glance toward the door at 7:15, catch myself preparing a booth that hadn't been touched in nearly 2 weeks. The town moved on, as towns always do. Customers stopped commenting. Kathy dropped the subject. Ellie avoided it altogether. But I couldn't let it go. I started dreaming about him, quiet dreams like the mornings we'd shared. In the dream, he'd sit at that booth looking smaller than he ever had, reading a book with blank pages. Every time I'd try to speak, he'd vanish. I couldn't shake the guilt either. Not guilt that I'd done something wrong. Guilt that I hadn't done more. One night, unable to sleep, I found myself opening that wooden box again. The one I kept under the bed. I took out Dad's photograph first. He looked so young there, his face tanned and worn, eyes kind but tired. He'd been an army medic, the sort who fixed wounds and hearts in equal measure. Next, I pulled out his field journal. There's a page I come back to, often creased and slightly torn at the edge. Gave half my bread to a kid today. Tiny thing. Probably hadn't eaten in days. Johnson said I'm soft. Maybe I am. But I'd rather be soft than cruel. You don't lose anything by sharing a meal, but you can lose yourself by walking past someone who's starving and pretending you didn't see. Those words weren't just my father's, they were my compass. I remember being that hungry girl, the one who waited for a parent to come home with leftovers. I remember what it felt like to be offered something warm without explanation or condition. That's why I fed the boy, not for thanks, not for recognition, just because someone once did the same for me. And even now, even after all the backlash online, the photo, the comments, the assumptions, none of that mattered compared to what I'd seen in that kid's eyes the last morning he came in. He hadn't said goodbye, but he'd looked at me, really looked for the first time. And in that brief second, I saw something I hadn't expected: trust. That look had to mean something. Still, I couldn't deny the ache in my chest each morning. One Tuesday, I placed a single pancake on a plate and carried it to the booth anyway. No frills, no fruit. Just simple, warm, and waiting. When I turned around, Kathy was watching me from the coffee station. She didn't say anything. Just gave me a shrug and turned away. Progress, I guess. That night I walked home under a pale moon and stopped at the diner's window to look inside from the sidewalk. The booth was empty, but the plate still sat there, steam gone, cold syrup untouched. It looked like a memorial, a quiet little altar to something unspoken. I pressed my hand to the window. I hope you're okay, I whispered to the dark, wherever you are. It was a Thursday morning, cold enough that the windows had begun to fog from the warmth inside. I'd just poured fresh coffee for the early truckers when everything changed. First came the silence unnatural for a place like ours. No dishes clinking, no banter from Ellie at the grill. Just stillness. Then I saw them. Through the front window, 4 large black SUVs pulled into the gravel lot like a funeral procession. Government plates. Every door opened in sink boots, hit the pavement, and uniformed men stood tall in the morning frost. Mark, the manager, appeared from the back, tugging at his collar like it might stop him from sweating through his shirt. "What the hell is this?" he muttered. The door chimed. 3 men stepped in. The one in the center wore a full military dress uniform, medals shining even in the dull diner lighting. His face was stern-aged by experience, not years. "I'm looking for a woman named Jenny," he said. The room fell quiet again. Even Ellie stopped flipping eggs. My hand was still wrapped around a syrup bottle. I set it down slowly and stepped forward. "That's me." The officer nodded, removing his cap. "Colonel David Reeves, U.S. Army. I've come on behalf of someone you knew, though you may not have known his name." Before I could respond, he reached into his jacket and held out an envelope, official seal, crisp edges. "This is from command. But more importantly, I've been asked to deliver a message. It's personal." I took the envelope with shaking hands. "I don't understand." The colonel's voice softened just slightly. "You've been feeding a boy for the past few months. A quiet one. Reads a lot. Comes in alone." I nodded slowly. My throat tightened. "Yes, every morning, until he stopped. His name is Adam. Adam Thompson. He's the son of Master Sergeant James Thompson, one of my men." The weight of the name hit me like a rush of wind. "Adam's father was deployed several months ago," the colonel continued. "It was a classified mission. He didn't know his wife had left shortly after. She walked out and left Adam behind." I gasped. "He was too afraid to tell anyone. He thought if social services found out, they'd take him away. He used what little his father left behind, stretched it for food bills, managed on his own." "He came here," I said softly. "He came to me." Colonel Reeves nodded, "because he knew he'd be fed without questions." I felt the letter trembling in my hand. "He wrote about you in every letter to his father. Said there was a woman at the diner who never pried, just made sure breakfast was hot." The colonel cleared his throat. "Sergeant Thompson, he didn't make it home. He died in Afghanistan 6 weeks ago. The world stopped. I closed my eyes. For a moment, all I could see was that small boy at the corner booth hunching over his plate like it was the only safe place he had left. He left a final request, the colonel continued, that if anything happened to him, we find you. Thank you. Let you know that your kindness gave his son something to hold on to. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of worn paper. This was read at his memorial. It's from James. He unfolded it and read aloud. To the woman who gave my son a warm meal and a place to feel normal, you gave me peace. Knowing someone was looking out for him even in silence meant more than I can ever repay. You didn't just feed him. You protected the last piece of my world. Tears blurred my vision. The entire diner sat in reverent silence. Even Kathy had her hand over her mouth. Colonel Reeves stood tall again, then offered a salute, sharp, respectful, deeply personal. The other soldiers followed. And in that moment, I, a waitress with aching feet and pancake batter on my sleeve, stood not as someone small, but as someone who mattered. Because somehow kindness had found its way back. The days after the colonel's visit felt dreamlike, like I was living someone else's story. Word spread fast. First through town, then through Facebook, then the local paper. The same group that mocked me weeks earlier now reposted the story of Sergeant Thompson's letter with hashtags like Real Heroes and Kindness Matters. People I'd never seen before started showing up at the diner. Veterans passing through. Military families who said they'd read the story online. Some left challenge coins by Adam's booth, others slipped thank you notes under their plates with tips that made my hands shake. Mark, the manager, didn't say much, but one morning I saw him hanging a small American flag over the booth in the corner. Underneath it, he placed a bronze plaque, reserved for those who serve and the families who wait. It was simple, quiet, just like Adam. A week later, I got a letter in the mail. The handwriting was careful, the words spaced like they were trying to behave. Dear Miss Jenny, I didn't know your name until the day the soldiers came, but I knew your face. You looked at me like I was normal, like I mattered. Even when I couldn't say thank you, I wanted to. My grandparents are nice. I'm safe now. But I still miss your pancakes. Love, Adam, P.S. I finished my book. It had a happy ending. I framed it, hung it right above the coffee station. Not to show off, just to remember. Sometimes customers ask about it. I smile and say it's from a boy who reminded me why kindness should never ask for proof. Months passed, but that story never really left. Soldiers kept coming. Struggling families found their way to that booth. Ellie even started sending out extra toast plates by accident. Then one morning, I found something waiting for me, a single challenge coin on the counter. One side had the Special Forces insignia. The other said, Semper Memor, always remembering. No note, no signature, just that. And somehow it said everything. If this story touched you, if it reminded you that simple kindness can echo far beyond what we see, like, share, subscribe. Because the world doesn't need more noise. It needs more people who quietly show up plate by plate, day by day. And maybe, just maybe, your smallest act will be someone else's turning point.